Welcome to another episode, guys. I've been walking around all morning for 2 hours, listening and filling my ears with this guest's amazing wisdom. So, Naketa, thank you so much for being here. I'm really genuinely excited for your brain.
Thank you so much. I am super honored, and I already know we're going to have a fantastic conversation.
Oh, there's going to be so much juiciness. I was researching obviously about you recently, and I thought, I've met my match. You are a nerd, and I love that about you. You've got
Yes.
so much amazing stuff to share. So we're going to get into all of that today. Before we do, I'd love to know, what is something that you do for fun?
Okay, I do a lot of stuff for fun. The main thing that I would say that's the most reasonable, that I do the most consistently, is I like solo dancing. Like we're talking, and if we weren't recording and I had to stay still to like not have my earrings knock across the microphone, I would just break out into a dance. I'm
Yeah.
that person, and I'm not skilled at it, by the way, so it's extra fun.
Even better. Even better when you
Mhm.
don't take it so seriously, right?
I don't.
Mm. Another question before we dive in is, what is something at the moment in your world that is magical?
My grandbabies, they are
Oh,
3 and 4. They are pure joy and magic all rolled up. The
oh,
best. If I could have
goosebumps.
skipped my kids to get to them, that's what I would have did.
I'm sure your kids will love hearing that.
Oh,
Mm.
tell them all the time.
Yeah. All right. So for anybody out there listening who has never come across your stuff, which I highly encourage, guys, go and follow. Naketa, who are you and what do you do? How do you serve this world?
Yeah. So I'm a balance and relationship advisor, the number one balance and relationship advisor in the world. I serve power couples, married women entrepreneurs, and a few bold leaders. Really, what they come to me for is they're ready to recalibrate and own their right to be intentionally selfish. Typically, it's because they are taking good self relationships, good couple relationships, and taking them into bliss. They know that there's a few gaps. They're not knocking on the door of divorce. They're not hating themselves or self deprecating. They're just ready to self actualize and optimize where they are for where they want to be.
Oh, that is so amazing. I love it so much. And there's so much already that I want to ask you. So let's start with self, because you wrote a
Mhm.
book, which congratulations, by the way. I
Thank
am
you.
like in honor of people, like just so much respect for people who have done that. So you wrote a book called Selfish, and a big part of
Mhm.
what you do and a big part of your message is reclaiming, or not necessarily reclaiming, but changing or reframing that word to mean something
Mhm.
really positive. So, would you mind speaking about what's your message around women being, quote, selfish?
Yeah, and you actually had it dead on. I had to redefine the word because it's anchored in such negativity, egotism, all of the things that don't feel good for any human to be called, let alone a woman specifically. But the nerd in me did a little research. When the word downloaded to me in my spirit as the title, I just saw the title of my book being selfish. And I had a visceral reaction like, I'm not selfish. I'm the least selfish person I know in the world. But it came to me, and I'm a super spiritual person. I'm a Christian, I'm a minister, all the things. And I was like, I got to go do a little research. And I found that the word was put in our lexicon in the mid-ish 1600s by a Pentecostal bishop who put the word in our lexicon as a frame of, it was really meant for women who were not going to stay in their place. The
Mm,
parishioners were coming to the bishop because in the 1600s, you had to ask for permission to do anything. And they
mm.
really wanted the right to say no to their husbands for having sex when they didn't want to. And if you can remember back to the 1600s, for all of you history buffs out there,
Yeah.
you didn't have a choice. Women were chattel, you were property. So the bishop, in turn, in their own scripted way, basically said, if you're not pushing a baby out of your vagina or your menses is on, you have no right to tell your husband no because you are property. If you do, you are being selfish. Now, that word gets in our lexicon. Here we are 500 plus years later, holding each other down because of it and stripping ourselves of our power because we thought that this is something that we had to hold up as a standard, like be selfless, give, don't say no, boundaries are bad, all the things that kind of get consciously and unconsciously interpreted from that. And obviously, I'm not rocking with that on any level. And I'm sure you aren't, and neither is
Mm.
any man or woman that's listening to this podcast right now. So I said, let me redefine it. And I
Yeah.
did so that we could reclaim our power. So I redefined the word as an intimate personal gift to create your joy. When you are intentionally selfish, you give yourself the spaciousness you need to do your work, to
Mm.
get to the place where you can personally develop and evolve and transform, to forgive yourself, let alone forgive others. The forgiving others part we've all heard, but that also makes you feel selfish when you have a hard time letting go of whatever it was that you needed to forgive. Like I said, I forgive him or her or them, but I'm really still pissed about it because we haven't forgiven ourselves. If you don't give yourself that space and be intentional about it, how can you? How can you really forgive anyone of anything if they are always up your butt, for lack of a better
Mm.
expression, and constantly smothering you with their expectations and their wants and their desires and telling you that you're not giving enough? You can't unless you're doing it out of resentment. So, my reframe of it is back up. Give yourself some space. Stop breastfeeding the world. Take a moment, nurture yourself ultimately, so that when you're filled up, fueled up, whatever you want to call it, you can actually pour from your overflow. And when you give, it's not out of resentment or regret or being pissed off that you had to do one more thing. You actually get to create these expansive boundaries that allow you to create your joy your way. So,
Wow, there is so much magic in what you just said. And I think you're so right because it's got so many negative connotations, that word selfish. Women tend to give and give and give and overexert themselves to everybody's needs except for their
mhm,
own. How
yep.
does that play out? Like in a lot of your clients and the people you see, they're very ambitious women and they're often
Mhm.
overexerting themselves. So, how does that play out for your clients? And what are some of the ways that they can start to insert those really healthy boundaries so that they
Yeah.
can self actualize from a place of overflow?
I have to get really aggressive in a loving way, always creating a safe space first. But because a lot of the women, particularly the men too, but the women are not just ambitious, they're tenacious. And to give the expression that's a little visual, it's like a dog with a bone. I'm not letting it
Mm,
go. And
mm,
women are like that when they're passionate about
mm,
anything,
mm,
especially their career and their goals that make them feel validated and
mm,
fulfills, like they can check the box and say, yeah, I did that. I might not be great at this, but I did that. And they're very
mm,
focused and almost fixated on it. So to bring them in a little bit and give them the space that they need, I ask them really jarring, provocative questions like, all right, Brianna, it's 9:12 p.m. You got 3 hours to live. What are you letting go? What are
oof.
you doing? What are you doing different? That's it, clocks. You don't know what it's from. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how. You got 3 hours. What's coming off your calendar? What are you
Oof.
saying no to? What changes knowing you only have this small amount? And sometimes it's 6 hours, 12 hours, whatever, but it's a very aggressive reframe. And
Mm,
because women don't like to lose, especially ambitious women, they don't see it as oh, you're just asking me that as like a little imaginatory game. They take it very seriously because they want to win the test that I'm
mm,
asking them. And the test is really them. What are you willing to do for yourself if you only have this small amount of time? Well, guess what? That fourth divorce party that you're going to with your friend that you don't even really get along with, but you've been friends, quote unquote, since college, that comes off the list, right? Send that
yeah.
chick a gift. Tell her congratulations and keep it moving versus flying out 3 hours, booking a hotel, spending 3 days, like doing all the things just so you can feel like you have work life balance when you don't even really want to be in most of these spaces because no is non existent for an ambitious woman. It's always this taboo thing that you're not supposed to do because you're supposed to be superwoman and do it all. And I'm like, listen, there's commercials in all the TV shows for a reason because they all need breaks. That's what the commercials
Yeah.
are for. You don't see Wonder Woman and Superwoman and all the people taking a break, but they really do in real life.
Yeah.
So let's take a break and give ourselves permission to pause. But you have to want to pause for a reason, and there has to be something that feels worthy to you. So how about you be the thing that's worthy?
Ooh, I love that really aggressive reframe. And it's so true. I say this to clients all the time. If you had one day left to live, I always say,
Mhm,
what would you do? What are the things that would light you up? But that's such a good way of thinking, what would
mhm,
need to go? And
mhm,
a lot of clients I find they'll say things along the lines of, well, probably this and probably this, and these people don't make me actually feel that good, or this thing
Mhm,
doesn't make me feel lit up, this thing drains my energy. However, they have
mhm,
identified by this point that there's a little bit of people pleasing that happens. And so
mhm,
to insert that without feeling like a bitch, or without feeling like you're going to miss out on something, without feeling like you're a bad person, without feeling
mhm.
guilty, is really difficult. So
Yeah.
what do you say in that situation where you've identified that I might be in this situation people pleasing a little bit and I
Mhm.
need to draw a loving boundary? How do you go about that?
Yeah, the formula, I would say, it's kind of like a worded mathematical formula that I created for balance. For me, balance is your truth, admitting the truth of what you really want in this world, in this chapter of your life, if we can narrow it down more specifically, over the boundaries that you're willing to create so you can achieve that truth as reality. So if you have a client that's saying, "You know what? I I feel like I'm I'm doing really good in my business and in my career and I make multi six figures, but I really feel like I can be a mogul of a 7 or 8 figure empire. That's really what I want. That's my truth. So we need to put some boundaries in place so you can achieve that. And
Mm,
giving them that kind of context, those parentheses, those brackets, if you will, typically help them strive. Because again, we're oriented. We need boxes to check, all the
mhm.
things. As much as we don't want to think that we're list writers and box checkers, most ambitious women, if they're honest, will say that they are, right?
Yeah.
So let's give some brackets and let's give you something to do. So we need boundaries over your expectations.
Mm,
What are some expanded boundaries that we can put over that? Well, all right, let's look at the private expectations you have of yourself. Are you
mm.
still holding on to when I'm 22, I'm gonna do this? Girl, you ain't been 22 in a long time. It's been multiple decades, right?
Yeah.
So you're still holding yourself to that private expectation that you wrote back when you were 18, 20, 25, saying, I'm going to have this by this age and I'm going to do that by the other. And even though you've accomplished amazing things, you actually still feel guilt and shame and frustration, maybe even some anger and rage, depending on what's going on under there, all because you didn't do X by Y time frame.
Mm,
So they're not acknowledging the actual accomplishments. They're not reflecting and celebrating the actual accomplishments, which would fuel them and give them some juice to go forward towards that truth of running that multi 7, 8 figure empire. Instead, they're berating themselves and being unkind because, oh, well, I should have already had the law degree. Yeah, I should have already done this. I should have already had the 3.4 kids. I only have two. Like, and even
yeah.
though the two almost killed me, I'm not a good mom because I didn't have the third. Like,
Yeah.
miss, you've
Yeah.
done amazing things. Miss
Yeah.
mindset. You've done amazing things and bringing them back into that. So I help them look at there's 5 actual boundary zones that we do. There's the expectations of others is really the easy one because
Mm,
people lean into negativity bias automatically clinically, so they can always go and be like, yeah, well, my mom expected this and my dad expected that and my ex-boyfriend when I was 15 expected that. So there it's a little easier for them to see that and break those down, but those private expectations we were talking about is so
mm,
much harder because that means going in and looking deeper at the real cause, the real barrier that you're facing. And
mm.
that's just one of the 5 areas. And then
Wow.
we have our personal habits, boundaries. Like, well, you said you want this multi 7+ figure thing, but when's the last time you took a walk? When's the last time you exercised? You need energy to be running an
Yeah.
empire, ma'am. Like, so what are
Yeah.
we doing? I'm not calling you fat or lazy or slovenly. I'm just saying you said your truth is this multi 7 figure, blah, blah, blah. That means you
Mm,
have to have energy for team management, for leadership, to make sure the finances is good because you don't want to have this booming business that actually got stole from you from your CFO because you didn't know anything about numbers. So you have to have energy. Let's look at your personal habits. The other boundary zone is your perspective. What are
mm,
you doing to be open minded? To
mm,
always be a nerd, to always be a student, willing to learn and ask questions and not be the smartest person in the room so you can gain other perspectives. You have to do that if you want to go the distance at the end of the day, or else you're just going to be a cookie cutter example clone of someone else. And
Mm,
don't you want to be your own category? Don't you want to
yeah.
make your own lane? Like, isn't that the whole reason that you decided to push through those bad breakups, to get rid of that cousin that was draining you? Because all he or she wanted to do was talk to you about the same thing over and over
Mm,
for 2 hours every day, as if you didn't have a family and dreams and things to do. There was a
yes.
reason you broke up those hard platonic and romantic relationships so you can have things. And it wasn't to sit in this stupor of
Mm,
creating that rigmarole that of mediocrity that you might have
mm,
potentially came from. And there's a couple more areas, but for the most part, we have to look at the boundaries and expand them, but we break them down in, I would say, digestible. They're all tough to swallow. So let me be honest about that,
yeah.
but digestible, tough pieces to chew on.
I love that so much. And it's something that I sort of do as well is like, first, let's look at your dream. Let's look at your vision. Let's get so lit up about your life and then put the boundaries to align with that. Because otherwise, you're just making these
Yes.
boundaries that you think you should have, but what for? And so, for those people who, you know, they maybe have been in this cycle of people pleasing and doing everything for everybody else and giving into
Mm-hmm.
societal expectations. And I should be doing this, and my kids need this, or my husband needs this, and I should be doing this degree. La, 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 la.
Yeah.
What I find sometimes happen is women wake up, and that's usually when they come to me and they're like, I don't know who I am. I actually don't know what
Mm.
lights me up. I don't know who I am. So, what do you say in that situation? How can we start to reignite that flame and that internal truth that you speak about for the women who are like, I want to know who I am again?
Yeah. And for that, it's a little bit of a layered question, as I'm sure you know from the work that you're doing as well, because I don't want to skip over and say, well, let's just start a new canvas, let's paint a new picture and go for broke, because that feels disingenuine to
Mm,
whatever the pain and the hurt is. So I get
yes.
to use my clinical skills here. Like, my background
Mm,
as a licensed clinical social worker, a trauma specialist, and a sexologist before I became a balance and relationship advisor. So I get to go into my own color paint, can of paint, if you will, and pull out some colors to help them see the possibilities. And so we look at what are some of the rooted scripts that are going on, which is a lot of what I talk about in Selfish, which isn't a self-help book. It's my survivor story, my personal transformation story. And I talk about those early scripts that if you would have just looked at the scripts and not finished the book, you would think, oh my God, she died, she committed suicide, she was a drug dealer. She had to be all these things, because based on these scripts that she
mm,
grew up with, there's no way this woman became anything. And it
mm,
was unfortunate and sad. But I also am sharing in the book and in the story, if you continue, you see the scripts that were laid that weren't of my own fruition. They're put there between the time you're conceived, literally that third trimester of your being in your mother's womb, up until somewhere between 7 and 9 years old. The studies are a little
yeah.
varied on that. Those are when your scripts are formed by other people, by
Yeah.
sights and sounds, your environment. And then everything else is an imprint to confirm or disconfirm that script as a reality. At
Yeah.
some point, when you become aware, why do I think this way?
Yes.
Why, why do I have this opinion? Why, I don't know why we think that all green people are bad. Like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? When you start to question your own questions and kind of self-coach yourself, you give yourself that opportunity to shift your perspective that we were talking about earlier,
Mm,
and open yourself up to the possibility that things can be different, that it
yeah.
doesn't have to be in the context of whatever cult you grew up in. And
Yeah.
most of all of us grew up in a cult. Our
Yeah.
house is a cult compared to, right?
Yeah.
The community, the neighborhood, the block, so on and so forth, let alone the world. But once you realize, and not saying everything in the cult was bad, you might have learned some good hygiene routines or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you realize, wait, this isn't normal for everybody, not everybody thinks about that. There's other ways to think. Then you can see the possibilities of other colors you didn't even know existed in the spectrum. So sometimes we do have to go deep with the clients,
Mm,
as I'm sure you do as well, and
mm,
say, wait a minute, do you know that there's multiple colors in this spectrum? Or are you only using the three colors that you grew up with? and you're tired of trying to figure out new ways to shape that world for you with, well,
Yeah.
I was only told that I was a good science and math person, and that was what I had to do. But I really want to create shoes and design fashion. But my family said that fashion was horrible and you'll never make money in that. And that's a starving artist. But that's really what I want to do. But I became a scientist and a mathematician. And now, yeah, people pat me on the back for being a rocket scientist, but I'm actually unhappy with all the money and all the accolades and all the things that I've accomplished because I did it because someone told me I had to, and it
Mm.
was expected of me. So I helped them see that there's other colors that were trapped underneath of there, stuck way under the box that they weren't given access to. But now that they have it, what's your choice? Are you choosing to still see the three colors? Or are you choosing to see the possibilities of what else you can create now that you have access to others? And that's where the real work begins for all of them.
Oh my goodness, Naketa, while you're speaking, I am like, I love your brain. I love the way you tell a story. I love this conversation so much. And I think it's so true. And we can't see we can't see our blind spots. And so
Mhm.
do you have any practical or actionable steps that you would give to ladies or to women or to anybody listening who is like, okay, I'm willing to see that there might be other possibilities for me. I'm willing to paint with all the colors that are available
Mhm.
and to recreate this new vision for myself. Where would you start?
Yeah. And so it depends on the person, but let's just say that they are and I say this with love, a typical ambitious. I know there's no such thing as typical,
Yeah.
but go with me. A typical ambitious woman that has a full productive schedule where she has almost no breaks in between her calendar. She
Mm,
schedules everything from
yeah.
vacations to intimacy.
Yeah.
And although that's not necessarily bad to make
Yeah.
sure things get done, she's so rigid that she
Mm,
can't really move outside of the lines of her calendar, with the exception of a full-fledged emergency, right?
yeah.
That's the typical ambitious woman that I'm
Mm.
talking about. I know none of you that are listening to this fall into that category, but that's who we're talking about right now. So that woman, the first thing I do is ask her, how many times do you have to pee? I'm dead serious. How many times do you have to pee in a day? What do you mean? How many times do you have to empty your bladder? I don't know. I mean, when I think about it, I have to go all the time, but I probably just go when I really, really need to, like 3 times a day. Your bladder fills up every 45 to 50 minutes, whether you're
Wow.
drinking anything or not. It's squeezing water from your organs and doing other things. So if you're a typical ambitious woman, you are pushing through, and God knows, first partaker, I did it too, would go
Mm.
12 hours without taking a break because I was moving, right? Like you just do it and it feels like everything just shuts down because you are in fight mode and your kidneys, everything is like, let's protect. She doesn't have time. Keep going. But the stress that puts on you, the way your cortisol levels rise up, the way your adrenaline is in overdrive, it is breaking your body down. So I
Mm.
asked them like a very personal and almost cheeky question on purpose because they're thinking I'm going to, do some trauma surgery. And I'm like, that's not quite how that works. So let's like start with something, ABC level. And then I move them into, how do you think you would feel if you actually, I don't know, every 2.5 hours had a 15-minute break where you could get up from whatever you're doing. You might be running around, you might be sitting down, whatever, and just have a moment to go to the bathroom, whether you had to empty your bladder or not, but you
Mm.
have the time built in. What does that do for you? And I
Mm.
actually have them envision it. So we do a lot of guided imagery work so I can walk them
Mm.
through it. And if I can get them to see the possibility in just 15-minute increments, now we can create blocks of time where they can give themselves full permission to pause. So, for an example, for myself, as someone who clearly was not going to the bathroom for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time, my
Mm.
husband and my youngest, who lives with us, she's in college, would be like, Mom, did you eat today? Like, what is happening?
Mm.
Like, I've only seen your gigantic water bottle, but what else is up there? And I'm like, well, there's lemons in there. Doesn't that count? Right.
Yeah, I
Like
get that.
that, right? Like that's who I was. And then the body aches and all the issues that were happening years after because of it, I had to do a reframe for myself and also with my clients. Do you want to be breaking down and not have mobility in 5 years, 10 years,
Mm.
15 years? Or do you see yourself actually being able to eat from the fruit of all your labor 15 years
Mm.
from now? Because if
Mm.
you keep going in the way that you are, you're not going to have much energy to
Yeah.
enjoy anything. And I'm not even going dark with all the health issues
Yeah.
that can come from it. So I will give them an example for me. Me and my entire company, 6 week self-lovecation every single year. Every
Mm.
single year. And I time it where it makes numerical sense. The best time of the year for me, with around anniversaries, birthdays, all that stuff that I would have taken vacations for anyway. So I make
Mhm.
it make sense for me. And I
Mm.
remind them, you don't have to take a 6 week self-lovecation or sabbatical. Like, you can just start with 2 hours, a
Yeah.
block of time that you can literally call permission to pause on your calendar, 2 hours. If you're an entrepreneur, which most of my clients are, we call them CEO or founder flow days, depending
Mm.
on if they rep as a CEO or a founder. A flow day. What does that do for you? Well, it takes an intangible thing and makes it tangible. If I go for a walk, a swim, sit and wiggle my toes and not think about work, all of a sudden these downloads have room to come in. Look at that.
So
They
true.
actually can come in and be like, oh, remember that problem you had 3 weeks ago that kept you up for 4 nights and didn't allow you to enjoy anything? Here's the solution. I was always here. I was waiting to get through the noise, but I couldn't
Mm.
because you were so productive.
Mm.
Hashtag busy in your calendar, and you had no space for me. We as women are so amazingly powerful, and we have so much access to brilliance that is literally on a conscious continuum level. I know I'm going really woo woo here for a lot of people,
Love it.
but we're connected on so many levels.
Mhm.
We can't access it when we're too crowded and
Yeah.
literally crowded and clouded with the noise of ambition and busyness. And ambition is not bad, but we make it a mistress. We make it the thing that we're cheating with. We make it the thing that's distracting us from our family, the thing that's distracting us from actually growing the empire that we want, because we get so fixated. Like, neurodivergent people are have brilliant, beautiful minds. Both of my grandchildren are neurodivergent, and so is my husband. They're amazing, weird, peculiar people with these
Mm.
brilliant brains. One of the challenges is fixation. The
Mhm.
fixation can work in your favor when you're able to focus it for the right thing and to cut it off.
Mm.
Ambitious women who aren't neurodivergent, in general, the typical woman that I'm talking about, we have that gift of fixation, but we don't know how to turn it off.
Yeah.
We keep it on until we're laying in the hospital with an IV in our arm,
Mm.
or something dramatic happens where now we're forced to take a pause, but it's not a healthy pause. It's a emergent, critical, you need a life alert bracelet after this event type of pause. And that's not okay. We're built
Mm.
for so many magical, beautiful things, yet we drive ourselves in the ground trying to prove, usually to other women, by the way,
Mm.
we're trying to prove ourselves of our worth. And we were worthy the day we came into this world.
Oh my goodness, there's so much magic there. And it's so true. I say all the time, like for me personally, my magic always comes in when I'm out riding my bike. And it's like, well, of course, the downloads come when there's space. The inspiration comes, inspiration means in spirit. Spirit can only speak to you when you can hear, when you've got the space to listen.
Come
And
on.
I just love that you say that. I love everything you talk about. And I just to switch the gears a little bit, because I know how this plays out also when we look at, your background in sexology and intimacy and helping
Mhm.
relationships and power couples. I know for a lot of really, ambitious women, or just women in general these days, who
Yeah.
have very full lives. Maybe they're balancing a career or their work or their business, their company, their relationships. They're trying to be fit and healthy and have kids and get to the school
Mhm.
things and all of that. And
All the
sometimes,
things.
all the things, I do have a lot of women who sort of say intimacy romantically is
Mhm.
either it's taken a back burner. I'm
Mhm.
afraid of it. And a lot of women have said, I'm afraid of
Mhm.
it. I'm ashamed of
Mhm.
that whole
Yeah.
area of my life. There's this
Yeah.
huge paradigm there that needs some conversation. So, from your perspective, let's start with romance and that sort of intimacy. And I know you've spoken
Yeah.
about different types of intimacy. So,
Mhm.
let's start there.
Yeah.
What are the different types of intimacy that we're talking about now with romance and forever lovers?
Oh yes, Forever Lovers are my favorites. You're so in my jam right now that I'm about to geek out and try to be calm at the same time. You know, when you're excited, you're just like, ah! There's 12 different types of intimacy altogether, but for the physical sexual intimacy that
Yeah.
most people think about, romantic kind of encompasses the emotional and communication intimacy as well, which are type 2 and 3. Physical sexual intimacy doesn't always have to include some form of penetration,
Mm,
regardless of the gender of the couples, right? And a lot of people think that we haven't really done the deed if there was no type of penetration involved, which isn't true. Your
mm,
physical intimacy could literally be an oxytocin boosting hug where you just
mm,
held each other. It's
mm,
really sexy if you can look into each other's eyes, like, as you're coming in and then you hold and you pull apart and you're looking at each other's eyes.
mm.
It actually does something in our neural chemistry with the brain, which is a whole nother thing. That's an off-air me and you conversation. But
Yes.
the physical intimacy that a lot of people are uncomfortable with is because of those scripts we were talking about. Whatever they were taught about sex, sex is bad. It's not for children. It's not for you. Don't do it. And those conversations didn't change when they were in their 20s and in their 30s. It was now we just don't talk about it. Yeah, I know I have grandkids now. I don't need you to tell me what you did to get them here, right? Because we
Mm,
don't talk about sex. And a lot of families make sex bad instead of making bodies normal and
mm,
human and not shaming the little girl who's finally getting breasts because her body is changing and now she's bad for wearing a type of shirt near her brother when it was just her shirt. It just fits a little different now because she has curves, but we've planted these seeds that things are bad and they hold on to them when they become 20 and 25 and 30, and they should be because they're of consenting age and they have more ability to be responsible and their brains are fully developed after 25. They should be able to truly embrace their sexual desires and be positive about it, but they keep hearing, oh no, cover up, don't do that, don't show this, oh no, lights off. Like, we might be able to do something, but now I'm not sneaking behind my parents back or whoever. So that's no fun anymore. I've done the thing, I've rebelled already, but now you as my mate actually wants me to do this and you want to enjoy me and you want to explore me. Well, I haven't explored me. I don't know what I
yeah.
want. I just know what I've accepted in the
Mm,
dark, little, fast, hurry up so no one knows, right?
yeah.
And a lot of those scripts that were imprinted by those consistent behaviors confirmed those conversations that we heard or were told around us, because it's not always told directly to the child, but said around them. And I absorbed it as truth. Oh, you shouldn't hold his hand. You shouldn't kiss. Kissing is nasty. It's germs, right? You should never use your tongue. Like just things that we heard, not understanding when you're of consenting age. And I can't say that enough for everyone who's listening. And I understand people are very sensitive when it comes to their kids. And I am the auntie that all the kids come to have the sex talk because none of the parents want to have it. Using age appropriate language to help them understand bodies are normal and sex is good when you're old enough and mature enough to receive it and
Mm,
to give it. You are 15. You're not old enough. You can't deal with the consequences. I can barely get you to take a shower every day. That's how I know you're not old enough, right? Like, having age level conversations. So when they're now 18, 19, 20, and clearly, I mean, if you went to college, you already know what's going down, when they're at that age, right? Like now we need to have a different conversation. Do I want you to have sex just because you turned 18 or 20 or whatever? Not necessarily, because you might not be mature enough, right? Like you still
mm,
might have a maturity issue, but I know that you're more likely going to do it. So let's change the conversation. Now
mm,
that you're 25 and you're like, hey, mom, my body's different. What is this discharge? What's going on here? No one ever told me about it. Let's talk. Let's have a
mm,
conversation. So when you are in a consenting, healthy relationship and you want to have that physical intimacy, you have no shame around saying, keep them lights on. Nope, you see all of this stretch marks, cellulite, dimples, whatever. You better love it if I'm letting you near it, right? Like, and being able
yeah.
to embrace it and honor your body. But that's really hard to do if you've been shaming yourself since before you could talk. So a lot of it
Mm,
is helping the women and the men sometimes, because men have a lot of body dysphoric issues as well, and they have a lot of shame around their shape or how their bodies are changing when their testosterone is going down, which we know goes down tremendously after 30, like all of it.
Mm,
And they have a lot of shame around it too. So what they'll do is point the finger to make you feel smaller so they
yeah.
don't have to reflect on what's happening with them, because they do not want to have the medical conversations, right? Like
Mm,
we just don't. That's for other people. That's not for me. Like, no,
yeah.
dude, that used to be a 3 hour long intimacy session. It's now a lot less than that. So
Yeah.
let's have a conversation. But a lot of it is helping them do the communication intimacy to really open up the physical intimacy, if that answered your question.
100%. And as you were talking, I was sort of thinking like, and this might be a massive generalization, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying. What I've found is that a lot of women tend to have a lot of shame and a more difficult time with the physical intimacy,
Yeah.
whereas with the emotional and intellectual intimacy, it's not as difficult or shameful. Whereas the men or their husbands, their partners, whoever,
Mhm.
they're getting a bit, the women come to me a little bit frustrated that they can't get to that level because the men shut down or don't know how to have
Mhm.
those really deep conversations. So is that something that you've observed too? And if so, how do the women listening start taking little steps to create that emotional intimacy that they really feel like they're craving?
Yeah, I use a little clinical with meet you where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So with a lot of the power couples that I work with, which happen to typically be male and female couples, when the man is like, I mean, she looks so good and I just had to have her. And she's like, dude, I just finished running around with the kids, washing the clothes, doing this, changing diapers. I'm sweaty. I'm stinky from yoga and you want to touch me? Like, no, right? Like,
Yeah.
women are like, why do you think this is even an appropriate time to,
Yeah.
to connect with me? When he's like, I'm just looking at the glistening sweat. Like, I'm just turned on. And meanwhile, she's like, if you would have helped me with the dishes and changed the diaper, I would have been all yours after the shower, of
Yeah.
course, right?
Yeah.
But you didn't even offer. So that made me close up and tighten, because emotional intimacy is the foreplay for women. And
Yeah.
men are all about, for the most part, and I'm using a huge generalization here
Mm.
because we know there's a large continuum, but men are typically like, my medication is sex. If I had a bad day, sex will help it. If I'm stressed, sex will help it. If I'm angry, sex will help it. Like I'm good. And women are like, no, dude, if I'm angry, I need to be emotionally turned on, and I can let the outlet be sex. Don't get me wrong. Women can be very vivacious when they're angry, but they can't be angry at you.
Mm.
Right? Like you
Yeah.
can't be the focus or the reason that they are angry or upset or sad or frustrated. That's where that emotional connection, being on the same wavelength with them, understanding like, now it's not a good time. She's cutting up tomatoes with a butcher knife. Maybe don't go up behind her and grab her waist. Like maybe
Yeah.
not, because you just pissed her off, right? They don't necessarily get that. So having them meet each other where they're at with different little games, because I think play is pivotal. There's
Mm.
no other way to say that. Tapping into your imagination, raising your vibration with play is so pivotal. So we'll take small games to get women more empowered to ask for what they want. So here's a game that's an example that it's like a raving game. We have so many, but this one in particular is Jenga. Have you ever played Jenga?
Yeah. Yeah.
The wooden blocks, right? And you
Yeah.
stack them up and balance it. So we put a little spin on Jenga and we kind of make it almost like strip tease
Yeah.
Jenga, the XXX rated version of it.
Love it.
So I will usually send them or have them, if they're in another country, have them get the Jenga game and put it on something that's sturdy and not breakable, like a plastic tray or something. They both have to hold one end. So you're standing across from me, like right in front of me, for all of you who are listening and can't see this. You're standing right across from your lover. The Jenga, you have one hand, your right hand's on it, their left hand is on the other side. And you're each using one hand to play Jenga the way you
Yeah.
normally would do it. But there's a timer going on. So let's say we got 10 minutes in. We're playing, we're building, we're doing all the things. If you happen to drop the Jenga, like you messed it up and we were playing for 10 minutes, well, now you have to give me pleasure for
Mm.
that entire 10 minutes. The trick is you can only do what I ask you to do. You can't do anything more or anything less. So clearly we both win at the end of this game, right? So if we
Mm.
play for 10 minutes and you're my husband. Men are usually horrible with balance games, which is why I like to play it with the women. They typically win all the time. And it's good because we want them to use their voice and ask for what they want. You're my husband. You're my forever lover, my partner. You messed up 10 minutes in. Well, dude. Oh, and the whole time you're stripping, by the way. Like if anything is, shaking or rocking, you're stripping each time that I'm winning a point. So you're probably just down to maybe boxers and socks at this point. I'm a woman. I'm powerful. I'm awesome. I'm crushing this game. So I probably only took off a shirt or a bottom. I'm pretty much fully dressed. For that 10 minutes that we have, the Jenga game gets put down. And now you have to do everything I said. I said, take off one sock with your tongue. I said, take off the strap of my bra with just your teeth. I said, lick me here, touch me there, suck me there. Nope. I know you're getting excited because you feel my excitement and my body expression, but you cannot do anything that I didn't ask. Yeah. And obviously, a lot of the couples don't win the game successfully with the rules because they end up going in hot and heavy halfway through, right? Which isn't a bad thing as long as they got the practice of her asking and using her voice and him having to follow and let her lead, being empowered by the reality that you have to do what she says in almost like a dom submissive way without the painful parts of it. It's a huge turn on for the men and the women. And we do small things like that to just slowly empower them based on the level that they're coming at. I mean, if they already know what to ask for and they have no problem doing it, but maybe they don't leave room for him to say what it, that's a different game we're playing. We're going to do something different so that he can be more empowered to speak up and ask for what he wants.
That is so interesting. And I'm wondering how many people listening would instantly feel that like, oh my goodness, asking for what I want, expressing my desires, saying what I truly would desire is scary. And so that's that whole investigation of using your voice and what's coming up for you. And I guess the other part would be those women that you speak about and that we just mentioned who have all the things and all the hats that say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do this big ass, long-winded Jenga game.
Right.
Where am I going to do that in between nappies or clients or whatever? So what would you say to that, especially for the people who are, I don't even want to use the word time poor. Where do we draw the line and make it a priority, and how does that happen?
Yeah. And I would say that's a huge differentiator for our company. Because of course I could work with all the couples, right? And do all the things, but I choose to work with the couples that want to optimize. Like their fixation is self-actualization for themselves. Yeah. And they've been doing a great job, but now they realize they haven't given that same priority. Not that their relationships are bad. They're actually pretty good relationships, but they want to optimize it. So that's one of the huge differentiators that I get to play on. It's like, when you signed up for this, you said you would give whatever time you needed. Yeah. I'm not asking you to come to sessions for 4 hours a week. I'm asking you to take somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours a week to increase and amplify your intimacy. Because when I do the math, because I know how much money you make and you like are killing it, it is way cheaper to keep him than for you to have to divorce him, right? Right? So, I use a little humor because that's just who I am naturally, but I'm being very honest. Like if you went down it, you will be knocking on the door of divorce. You will be opening up other issues and challenges, which that kind of stress, that pulls you away from your high level boardroom activities because of the deficits in the bedroom. So I want to amplify intimacy from the bedroom to the boardroom, because here's the reality. If I had an amazing orgasm last night or this morning, whatever is your treasure, guess who's going to be the most innovative, most creative, and most energetic at my 9 a.m. meeting, right? Yeah. I am fully open, aware, and on because of, no shade to the men, that 30 minutes that we had or whatever it was, like whatever it was, right? I was being, nice, but whatever is going to really work, it has opened me up and made me I'm already dope on my own. I don't need a man, right? Even my husband that I love for 30, I don't need him. He doesn't need me, but I am so much better when I've had all that goodness. So if you want to look at it any kind of tangible way, you increase your ROI because you've opened up your innovation, your creativity, your leadership is heightened because your empathy has expanded, your compassion has expanded, all because you had a damn good orgasm.
Yeah.
And guess what that took? It took a little work. It took a little time. It took a little awkward, uncomfortable conversations for you to not be who you were when you were 20 some or 30, caught in the cult of old, and you expanded your perspective with those new boundaries that you embraced for yourself.
That is so powerful. And so something you said that's also very powerful is, and I love this. I haven't shared this before. I haven't shared this yet, but I got engaged about 2 weeks ago. Yay!
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. It's honestly like, I'm still in my little love bubble. I'm with my best friend, my human really. And something that you said there, which we speak about all the time, but it kind of triggers people a little bit because they're like, what? And I say, I don't need him. I don't need him, but I want him. Like, and you say that, and I love that. So can you just really expand on that for a second? What does that mean to be in a real committed relationship like that, and to have that belief system that I don't need you?
Yeah, it changes the game. It shifts everything. When you are empowered enough to realize that you will be perfectly more than okay, better than okay, you won't just be surviving, that you can thrive by your damn self. When you have really embraced that, and not as a t-shirt or something that you say when you're with your girlfriends and y'all throwing some champagne back, because somebody just had a breakup and you're trying to help each other out. But when you really believe it, it totally changes your entire vibration and the spirit of you when you walk in the room and you've attracted that person who's ready for you, because you don't need them and they don't need you. But the fact that you want each other is automatic juiciness. It's automatic relief that you don't have to be codependent on someone, or you feel like you can't make moves and do well in life if you don't have their brain or their muscle or their anything to do it. Now, the reality is 2 is better than 1, but it doesn't mean that 1 can't be amazing by itself, right? The number 1 in and of itself is a powerful number just by itself. 2 just makes it juicier. That's all. Yeah. 2 makes it deeper. It makes things expand greater, but you can still thrive in an exponential way if you choose to be single and savvy until right? Like until death do you part with yourself, or until the universe says there is someone that I've been shaping that is just for you, that I've been readying just for you. Your soul's half, because we are social creatures, is literally working through their stuff. They're being intentionally selfish to do their own healing work. And they won't be perfect because we aren't perfect, right? The imperfection actually is a little sexy in itself, right? Some of the flaws that just make that person unique, but aren't damaging or toxic, right? I'm not talking about those kind of flaws, but that in and of itself, all that stuff worked out, and you coming together to make this perfect sphere of unity is incredible. But guess what? You're a diamond right by yourself, right? Yeah. And when you know that and you embrace it, you won't take nonsense from someone. You won't let someone make you feel like you are less than because you weren't quote unquote anything until I came in your life. Like, check my portfolio, boo. I was doing very well before you got here, right? Like you want to be able to say that, not just numerically from a numbers perspective, but energetically, knowing that there are multiple people out there being ready. You were the one that I chose to embrace. You are the one that I'm creating this next level with. But do not by any means get it twisted and think that if you decide for some reason that you are too good or whatever is going on with you, that the universe won't kindly move you out of the way and kindly give me a new, bigger, better gift. Be very clear that I know my worth, and I'm always going to be worthy of nothing short of excellence for me. You are
Yeah.
my excellence right now and hopefully my forever lover. But if you get it in your head that I can't be amazing without you, I'll just have to remind you, I don't need you. I want you. So I like share these stories with
Mm.
women to remind them, do you know how dope you are? Like,
Yeah.
let's take all the scientific language out the way. Like, you are sexy, you are amazing, you
Yeah.
are brilliant, like you are. And it's not fluffy language. It's real because I know the power of women. We're
Yeah.
so incredible. Men are so lucky to have us. It's crazy. But we are dope right by ourselves.
I love it so much. I love it so much. I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and I'd love to. So I'm just going to keep it. Usually I have some rapid fire questions at the end, but instead I've asked my listeners some questions that they had for
Mhm.
you. And so
Okay.
just there's only three, and I just wanted, they were all sort of similar. So I've put them into three questions. And if you just want to answer them somewhat, if you can, in some sort of succinct way, I guess they're quite big questions. One of them was, how would I, as a female, increase my
Mhm.
sex drive?
Mm, assuming that there's nothing medically, because we always rule out
Mm-hmm.
medical issues, assuming that there's no hormonal or medical issue, I would say self touch is really important. If you can figure out what stimulates you, and you don't have to go into full masturbation if you're not comfortable, or maybe you have a script or a context about it, because my point isn't to make anyone feel wrong or
Mm,
feel bad about it, but just knowing what feels good will help you. So if you know that you like light touch on the surface of your skin, just your arm or your thigh or your leg, that will really help you know what to ask your partner for. There's
mm.
also foods that are aphrodisiacs that can also help you get into the mood. Assuming no allergies, I always have to give these disclaimers because I'm like, Naketa told me to eat chocolate, and then I got anaphylaxis. Like, please
Yeah.
do not do anything that you know will harm you.
Yeah.
But there are foods that can definitely increase. Cinnamon is actually something that people don't think about. Cinnamon is
Mm.
a low key aphrodisiac. Add a little cinnamon to your coffee and do small things throughout the day to build up your oxytocin and work yourself into it. Start to visualize yourself being kissed, being sucked, being tickled, whatever it is that you like.
Mm.
You don't have to see your person for the entire day. Just imagine them with you. Now, in the context that you don't have a person in your life in this particular moment, didn't we just say you are dope right by yourself? Like, there are so
Yeah.
many things that you can do, but your imagination is a gift. And being able to visualize yourself being pleased and pleasured, whether you physically touch yourself or not, is a huge first step in the right direction. And adding in those things that make the difference, the scents, the smells, essential oils, aphrodisiac foods. A lot of people talk about oysters, but there's a lot of people with texture
Mm.
sensitivities and sensory issues. So you may not know you have that until you force yourself to do it. So start small.
Yeah.
Start with, some cinnamon spray or essential oil or
Yeah.
something in the room, some frankincense and myrrh. Do really small things to build yourself up into what feels erotic for you. Because that's the other script that we have. The thing that I find erotic with chocolate and strawberries and cream, you might be completely disgusted by. So it's
Mm.
really just knowing what you want to play with in small doses to make your cocktail of aphrodisiac sensory experiences, and just incorporate all five senses is the best thing that I could say.
I love the answer to that. It's so amazing. And then the other question was what to do, or the best sort of advice you could give when there's a real mismatch in sex drive in a relationship.
Mm, as in one partner doesn't know what they're doing, or
Or
one.
a mismatch in how often they want it, I think was the question.
Oh, for like the libido mismatch.
Mm,
That one is a lot harder. And the
mm,
reason I say that in the full context is because in my clinical hat and knowing what I know about trauma,
yeah.
there could be your person could have been a rabbit when you first met, and you guys were, everywhere all the time. So you're like, something's wrong, something's changed. A lot of people in their trauma responses have disassociated and detached.
Mm,
And then with time, with experience, with more challenges in life, they start to reattach to the trauma, even without knowing exactly what
Mm,
happened. And they start to almost, and the best way I can say it is, become cold.
mm,
And the coldness isn't directed towards you. It's because of what's going on with them. So I'm always careful not to
mm.
skip over the reality that
Yeah.
that's assuming, again, it's no medical issue like a libido drop because of low estrogen or any of that.
Mm,
It can be really challenging to just assume that it's a personal affront, that, oh, he doesn't love me anymore, or she's not into me anymore because we don't have sex anymore. Have a conversation.
mm,
You have to be patient with the reality that they may not have known this about themselves,
mm,
because you've both allowed this to be normal. You've
mm,
allowed this new normal to be present, so they don't think anything is wrong. And now you're brave enough and bold enough to address it, which we honor you for, hands down. But you've made that choice to be bold and brave. They're not quite there. So start with a conversation with, like, hey, babe, I really miss us being together physically. And be specific. I miss your kisses on my neck. I miss when you would touch my arm and you would stroke me, or you would come behind my back and pull me in and close and slip my panties off. Like, I miss those things that you
mm.
used to do in the middle of the night, that I know now that I'm older and have a really productive schedule. I'm like, dude, leave me alone. But I really do miss that, right? Like when
Yeah.
I'm not super tired. And I noticed that you haven't been doing it a while. Do you know, like, what's going on? Is there something different? Give them an opportunity to share with you, because maybe they haven't slowed down, permission to
Mm,
slow down, to really realize, like, God, it has been years since I've done that. I don't know
mm.
where once the kids came, once the new job came, once I started traveling, once you had that surgery, I just we kind of fell out of place. For some people, it's really an unintentional organic lapse that occurred because of time.
Yeah. And it's that, again, it's that intellectual or emotional intimacy that will help you with the physical intimacy, I suppose. So I love it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think the only other question that I was getting, it was lots of different ways of saying it, but essentially the question was, any quick tips for like how to spice things up again? And I think you've probably mentioned a few, but spicing things up when things have gotten a bit stale, stagnant, you've gotten a little
Mhm.
bit, overrun by life.
Mhm.
Just to spice things back up, what would be your top tips?
Assuming that you can't travel anywhere and there's a lot of restrictions on your time, start with a shower. Get
Mm.
in the shower together. First of all, water is very sexy and it does a lot of things. Now, I work with a lot of couples, from celebrity couples to engineers, all the way through. And I have engineer couples that are like 6 minutes of water pressure. That's it, because we want to protect the environment. So, sometimes we can get really logical, head versus
Yeah.
heart. And even with that, I'm like, there's 8,000 nerves in that clitoris. He don't need 6 minutes. So get in the shower, right?
Yeah.
If he's doing it right, all you need is 30 seconds, right? To get what you need out of it. And then we can save the environment and turn the faucet back off, right? So, I have to kind of go with what their barriers are, because we have a
Yeah.
lot of head trash that pops
Mm,
up and gets in the way. But showers are so good. They're awkward in the beginning. They're super uncomfortable if you haven't seen each other physically naked in a sexual way in the light of the bathroom, that huge spotlight, right? In a
yeah.
long time. So that can be awkward, but it's one of the fastest ways to get over that nervousness and discomfort. And if you're really shy, one of you can be turned around. You don't have to be facing each other right away, but I do encourage it. And it doesn't have to lead to penetration. I
Mm.
cannot stress that enough. You can do all the other erogenous zones. You do not have to go into penetration until you are moist and ripe enough to do so.
Mm. Oh my goodness, Naketa, I knew it when I first came across you. I love your brain, I love your soul, I love your heart. Everything about you is just,
Thank you.
it's honestly very, very inspiring, the way you speak, the way you learn. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your magic with the world. For the listeners who have loved this as much as I have, where can they find you and connect with you?
And I would say follow the Balance Bully podcast, which she doesn't know she's going to be on. So I'm just throwing that out there. But the Balance Bully podcast, we're everywhere. And if you want to go deeper and have a conversation, just go to thigpro.com. There's a little calendar button on there. And either myself or one of our CSAs will have an alignment. We call it a joy activation call, with you to see if it makes sense to potentially work together.
Oh, so good, guys. Go and have a look. And the podcast is amazing. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. It is 10 p.m. where you are. So please go and have a nice shower and unwind and relax. Thank you so much for your time.